and say hello, good afternoon, and welcome to what I think is session 22 of Talking Asperger's and More with Andrew. Welcome to you all. Good to have you here. And as I just said off air there, we are going to talk about ways and tips and strategies on how to support people who have Asperger's or autism at work. And it's fair to say that this is a big topic. There's a lots of straightforward, simple things that you can do that can make life better for the person on the spectrum. But also, I think you will find if you put a lot of these things into place, it will actually make your business perform better anyway, by getting on and setting out the way things should be done for people you have in your business. So I'm going to start with the first one, and that is the way that you communicate with the person who has Asperger's or autism has to be the right way for them. So if you communicate with all your staff in a certain way, let's just suppose that when you communicate with your staff, you send a memo or an email. Let's go for an email. And if someone prints it off, it's 6 pages long and it's screeds and screeds and screeds. That is not going to work for someone on the spectrum. They like short, sharp, precise information broken up in bullet points and not great screeds of information. They'll get lost in that information. They'll get overwhelmed by this. Suddenly I've got 6 pages of stuff to deal with. You've got to keep it short, concise, and to the point. This is where I love something that I used to use. Probably your children used to use it back at school. It's checklists. Checklists are wonderful things. Just say hello and welcome to Zoe. Are you there, Zoe? Okay, well, we'll carry on. You can say hello to us in a moment. But checklists are a wonderful thing because they serve 2 purposes. It means that you, as the manager or the supervisor of your team, have thought about what it is you want to communicate with your team beforehand. You've put your own thought process into mind and you've got these half a dozen points that you want to talk to them about. That's fantastic. You've got some structure to your own argument, your own discussion, and you've got it laid out clearly in your head what you want to cover. Checklists work for the people on the spectrum because you go through them one at a time. Just very simply, 1 point at a time, and don't rush it. Allow people to assimilate and process what you've said to them, what you've asked them to do. And it's useful to allow for questions at each point rather than questions at the end of giving out 6 pieces of information. Allow questions. And this is where something strange might happen with the person on the spectrum. They might sit there and not say anything. They are not ignoring you. What they are doing is their brain will be going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and they are trying to process what you've just asked them so that they can formalize their own thoughts so that they can then ask questions. So be prepared for them to sit there and look and not do anything. And this is where you don't want to start drumming your fingers on the table or staring out the window or looking at your watch. This is where you just have to be patient and allow the person on the spectrum to formulate their questions. And then they might come up with an absolute killer of a question that you might not ever have been asked before, because they think differently, they process information differently, and they will come up with something that could be quite a fundamental question that you may not have thought of before. So checklists are wonderful. Go through this 1 point by another, allowing for questions. If you've got visuals to display, and visuals is one of the other clues, but if you've got visual aids to use, like pictures or graphs or spreadsheet or tables, these are all great things to use at that point, because people on the spectrum are very visual. And we see things 3-dimensionally, or a lot of us do. We see things in our mind. And so getting pictures and images to help us understand what you've asked of them is very important. And so that the use of things like checklists and tables and bullet points, it really helps them understand and comprehend what you've asked them to do. So the other thing to remember with communication is they might be different in the way that they again, this comes on to another point I'll come on to in a little while, is written. They prefer written communication rather than verbal communication, because written communication should be clear, should be concise, have the bullet points that we said, rather than the sort of mid-corridor, oh, just go and do that, just over there like that. And the person on the spectrum is then confused about what you want them to do. So it's better to be clear and concise and do it in writing, because that way they can look at the individual points that you've asked them to do and do them one at a time. They're not having to second guess and try and guess what's going on. So communication is really important. The second one that I just alluded to is visual aids. Do you use whiteboards? Have you got images, pictures? Maybe if you're organizing sessions of work and you've got deliverables and target dates over given periods of time, have a diary or a planner or a calendar to say, here's your check-in point, here's your deliverable point, here's when this work needs to be done by, so that people can see on calendars, on planners, where things are needed to be done, so that they can put their own, right, I've got 2 weeks to do this particular part of the job, and then in another 2 weeks there's another particular part of the job, so that they can organize their thoughts, organize their own timing and their own mechanisms of dealing with things in a clear and concise way. So visual aids are very good. One of the other ones that works well is color coding. This takes me back to school. I worked, this was well before I knew I had Asperger's, color coding of things, with red, amber, and green, for example. Red means its top priority needs to be done first. Amber, medium priority. Green, low priority. And have these little techniques that work really well, because then the person on the spectrum can understand what it is you want to do, what needs to be done first, or what is the most important. If they've got half a dozen things to look at in the course of a project, what's the most important one to do? Maybe give that a different color, give it a different flag to the other items, so that you know that, and they understand the importance of those things. So color coding is a really useful tool. I say it takes me back to my school days of flashcards and things like that, but it works really well for people on the spectrum, because they like order, they like to know what priorities are, they like to know what needs to be done in a certain order, and having flashcards and color coding works really well for them. Just have a quick sip. The third point I want to talk about is the unwritten rules of your office. People on the spectrum tend not to be small talk, idle chit chat, and won't understand the unwritten rules of how your office works. So that someone else might know that when you've finished typing something up, it needs to be given to a certain person for review, or it needs to go to the secretarial team for formatting, or whatever it is. If that's a given that people assume or have fathomed out because they've been there a few years, the person on the spectrum won't know those unwritten rules of how your office works, what the procedures are. So it's really good, and it's a really good thing to do, is to set out, is to write down what your office protocols are. What are your procedures for dealing with this topic or that topic or something else? How does it all fit together? What's the fabric of how your office works? Write it down, because that will do two things, as I said at the beginning. It will help you formulate your own working environment, and it will then help the person on the spectrum understand what those rules are, what they need to do at a certain point in the project. Oh, this is a trigger point. I need to go and speak to someone else about this, or a manager needs to review this. And it makes a lot more sense of what's going on. And also, these are sorts of things that you should have in place if your company operates a quality assurance program within your business. I think it's ISO 9001, could be wrong with that. But if you have quality assurance procedures in your business, then having your procedures and protocols will be part of that business, be part of how you set up your business, how things are approved, how things are authorized, how things are signed and then delivered to clients. So it should be standard, but just giving another wee think about the protocols that you have in the business, the unwritten rules, it's really important for the person on the spectrum, because they won't get, they can't know if they're not told, and they won't fathom out what's going on if you haven't had that conversation with them. Fourth one, another big topic, the workplace environment. We could spend hours talking about the workplace environment. And I know Sam's giving a wry smile there. We could talk for hours about workplace environment, but it's really important that the place where that person works is conducive to them working effectively and efficiently. And the things you need to consider are your senses. Is it bright? Are there bright lights? Is it overhead strip lighting? Is he sitting next to a window with the sun blaring in? Have you got blinds? Could it be noise? Is there a lot of clickety clackety typing going on? Are they sat next to the printer, which is always going on? And then someone has to come and open the flap and close the flap, and it clicks and it clunks and it. That might seem very trivial to neurotypical people, but triggers like noise can be really, really damaging to someone's ability to concentrate and focus, and they could perhaps send someone into a meltdown. So is the place where they're working, is it quiet? Can they use noise cancelling headphones or earphones so that they can work better in that environment? Is they sitting next to Dave, who's a very loud talker, particularly on the telephone? Can we either ask Dave to quieten down, or can we make sure that the environment that the person is working in is as far away from noisy Dave as we can? That's not trying to put them in quiet little corners so that we can ignore them, but actually sometimes the quiet little corners are the best place for people on the spectrum to work, because it suits their environment, their hypersensitivity to noise and light. One of the others, and I know this is one that Sam talks about from her own experience, is smells. Our smells. Are people on the spectrum sensitive to smells, like someone's strong aftershave or strong perfume? Or are they sat next to the door right near the canteen or the kitchen, where mayonnaise, vinegary, noisy smells, noisy things and strong smells, really pungent things can waft down the corridor to them? That again can be a trigger. So are there any strong smells, or is there the potential for strong smells to be around in the office? Then try and organize it so that the person on the spectrum is as far away from those strong smells as possible, so that they can work effectively and efficiently without having problems. And because the sensory issues can be really quite strong. One of the ones that sometimes catches me is nylon carpets. Nylon carpets, if someone happens to drag their feet quite a bit on a nylon carpet, you can get static electricity, you can get a noise. It may not be a strong, loud noise, but you can get a jittery, jarring, sensational noise that can set your teeth on edge and really be quite difficult for people to understand the sensitivity and how that can impact. And nylon carpets and metal filing cabinets are great because you get static electricity blasting off them. Those sorts of things might seem trivial to neurotypical people, but they can be issues for people on the spectrum. The final one, I mean, there's a lot. We could be covering this until next week's talk. But the other one is, what are the available resources available to you as an employer that you can call up and use? There are organizations in the country. There's Autism Scotland, there's the National Autistic Society, and they quite often have a lot of free, very handy resources on their websites. And I was looking at one today just to prepare for this. They're free, easy to download, and they could be just a start point for you to think, I know I need to do something, but I don't know where to go to do something. So they're a good touch point. Or you can speak to practitioners like myself or Sam or others. You can find us on LinkedIn and websites and things like that. But there are resources out there to you. Some of them are free, some of them are on a commercial basis. But don't just sit there and think, I've got to do something, but I don't know what to do. It's really good that you've identified that you need to do something. Take the next step and find a practitioner, find a free resource, and see what you can find out from there. And then if you feel as though you need more clarification and more in-depth information, source a practitioner out, like myself, like Sam. There's plenty of us about, and have a discussion with them, see how they can help. Wow, I've covered that in 15 minutes. That was quite stunning. So I'm going to throw it open to the floor now and ask and ask you, the people on the call, how either do you have sensitivity to certain issues or management techniques and styles and blockages or challenges, or what techniques do you use that can help you get away from some of the problems that we've identified today? So who would like to have a go? Damien, is you're the you're
Um,
the you're the prompt for this topic because you mentioned it last week. So we'll let you have a chat first.
um, Office environment, I say, is important. Noise, I suppose, for me, is people whistling, for example, in the office. Any loud noises, or it's not necessarily loud noises, but it's unexpected, maybe noises that are not sort of ongoing. Maybe light, but that's all doable, all possible to resolve. Then chatter in the office is for me a big thing, especially if people are chatting about um, organizing work, organizing jobs in a very sort of informal way, where there isn't really a start or a finish to the discussion, but it's sort of general, and then people can get conclusions from those to move forward on a job, but you're not necessarily able to. I find it sometimes difficult to get to understand what the conclusions are of general chit chat when it's very informal. But a lot of people seem to work very well on informal chat in the office, whereas I work better with a formal meeting with, as you said before, bullet points, um, visually. Right, and I suppose the way I get around that is I try to turn discussions into something which is presentable. For example, if people start talking in the office about a particular job, I will then say, okay, I will send you an email, summarize what I'm going to do or what I think we should do on an email. So I'll turn general chit chat into something that's basically with bullet points or something that's visually possible to understand.
Yeah, yeah. I used to do that a lot with clients, particularly on construction sites that I was working. You go out on site, there would be a problem. You'd be speaking to teams. You come up with a solution. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Go back to the office, report to your boss, and write an instruction or write a memo, or if need be, draft a letter confirming just exactly what you've said, because that would then give your team, your superiors, the opportunity to say, that was excellent, but I don't want to do that. I want to change it. So that then gives them the opportunity to make the change in how they communicate, which isn't necessarily saying you did anything wrong, but there might be other reasons, contractual reasons with a major construction project, why they would want to do something in a different way. So I was always, and when I have those sorts of discussions, I would always do myself a file note. I would type up a file note, date it, file note with conversation with Dave, where it was out on the site, or if it was in the office, so that if anyone then said to me, you had a conversation with someone about something, what was that about? I could pull up the file note and give them a copy of it. If I felt it was important enough that it needed to be confirmed at the time, I would go and see my boss or write a memo or an email so that they all knew what the circumstances were, so that everyone understood what was going on. So really, if I didn't get confirmation from someone else, just as Damien said there, I would say, I will confirm, this is my understanding of what we discussed, these are the points, and this is what's going forward, these are your action points, these are my action points, and the time frames of which those are appropriate. So yeah, definitely, if there's lack of communication, I would make sure that I would then confirm my understanding of what we were doing. Yeah, that was always important to do that. It's good practice, but it gets you out of the situation where you're then put in the awkward position of having to justify something when people don't know what has happened. If you've got it written down and you've recorded it, you copied it into your boss or you've emailed it to your boss, they then know. They've then got the opportunity to read it and say, yep, that's fine, don't need to do anything with that, or, oh, hang on, I want to just clarify something. And so that gives them the opportunity to know what's going on the project on a daily basis. Sam, you got any thoughts on how we can support people in the office or in work? Sorry, not just the office, but in work.
Yeah, so I just want to add a couple of bits to what you said, which was fantastic. And so the first thing I noted down was Yes, sometimes you can get that blank face whilst people are processing, but sometimes you can also get what looks like I don't understand face, which might be a head tilt or a frown or both. And again, people might misconstrue, and then it gets more complicated because now they're over explaining instead of giving you time to process. So when people are asked to self-advocate, which they often are in organisations, the language that people can use to explain is, once you've given me instruction, can you just give me a couple of seconds to process it? Smile. It's not a bad thing I'm asking for. It's not a horrible thing. It's not hard work. I'm not making work for you. I'm just asking for a few seconds to process it. And then we can continue. Or check in with me that I've understood, and then we can go forward from there. And by the same token, I would say to people, if they're giving instructions, because I used to over explain everything because I was convinced nobody understood me, so I needed to explain it 5 ways in the hope that we'd get to the same place. Whereas that's not necessarily what they needed, but I didn't check in when I didn't know, when I wasn't self-aware. So then I learned to practice what I wanted to say, either in my head or on paper, deliver that one way of explaining that, and then stop and say, do you need me to clarify anything, or do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Then, based on whatever you get back, you can say, is it okay if I move on to the next point? Great. And that way you're kind of controlling the conversation, but you have the reassurance that the other person is absolutely with you the whole way. And unfortunately, many neurotypical people don't do that sort of thing. They have no interest in checking in. But if you can articulate to someone else that that's what you need, then you can start to build a new habit of the way that you have conversations with your immediate team leader or whatever it is, or a colleague. So that's quite useful. And I've met some people who they do want very clear, direct language, but sometimes they do need a lot of detail. So what you said was right. Find out what's right for the individual. Ask them what they need. So I might send an email to you, Andrew, and it's got, hi, Andrew, a bit of context, a couple of bullet points, and maybe an action with a deadline. Could you reply by return if this is okay with you to do, or something like that? Yep. So there's no ambiguity in that whatsoever. If you were someone who needed all the detail before you made that decision, I would then attach the detail that I know you need in order to say yes. Yep. So, but that's about me understanding what you need as an individual. You might need lots of detail and context before you feel you can make a decision. And what I've noticed is there's a trend. A lot of people that work in accounts and finance like the detail. They don't generally want to just take your word for it. They want to check the numbers themselves, and I absolutely respect that.
Yeah.
So that's just like an and. And the last one was just some people can be a bit overwhelmed by visuals. So the visuals are great, but I bet you've seen them as well, Andrew. I bet you've seen some really rotten visuals that either don't make sense, or they've got 27 colours and 43 fonts, and if they're slides, there's moving stuff going on, and it's just horrendous all the way. So there's something about tempering visuals with, let's keep it simple.
Yeah.
Pictures say more than words.
Yeah,
but don't make it ambiguous, sort of, sometimes people try and be too clever, and you kind of go, I don't know why that picture it relates to what you're saying, so let's be really obvious about it.
Yeah, I've seen some cartoony animation slides that I thought, what on earth is that about? I have not got a clue what that is about. And I'm sitting there
too clever
because they've found a way. Someone told them how to do cartoon animated pictures, and they've done one, or they've put a video with cartoon animation in it, which is great, super smashing, but doesn't help me understand what it is you're trying to make. And you're right. Yeah, I completely agree with you. It has to be what's right for the person on the spectrum.
Yeah, and it can be very hard to ask for what you want. So it's great that you're doing these sessions so that employers hopefully will watch them and understand. Sometimes they have to reach out and go, this is the sort of thing you can ask for, so that somebody feels comfortable saying, oh, yes, actually, I'd love to be able to wear my headphones if that's okay. Because in the last job I was in, that wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
And I might make that assumption that office work is a no headphone zone, because that's been my experience. When actually in this organisation, it's okay. But I won't know that unless you tell me. And if I was told off in the past, I'm definitely not going to ask.
I completely agree. One hopes that those are the sorts of things that you have the conversation with your supervisor, your manager, in your induction, when you Hopefully. First arrive and you've had your cup of tea in reception, and would you like to come down? And someone comes along and holds your hand all the way down to where you're going to work. And having a mentor for the first 2 weeks or month would be a fantastic thing, because Absolutely. they would help you with these unwritten rules that you haven't got written down.
Totally. Even call them a buddy if a mentor's too
big, too formal. Yeah. Absolutely. Just
someone your buddy for the next month.
Yeah.
Ask them anything.
Exactly. And those sorts of things really work. Well, again, I'm very much of the keep it simple variety. Yeah. If I can find a simple way to present something, I'll do it. It probably involves a spreadsheet or a checklist, but that's just how I am. That's how I work. That's how, I was having a conversation with one of my mentors yesterday, and I've got some work to do on the spreadsheet, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, so yeah, all these things shouldn't be seen as obstacles. They should be seen as opportunities to help the person that you have employed work best and more efficiently for them, because that does several things. One, it takes an awful lot of heartache and headache away from you by having someone who's not doing what you want. Two, that person is doing something that they know what to do. They understand what to do. They understand the rules, the protocols, the procedure. So they're comfortable in what they're doing. I'm just got to move this thing out my way. And that way they will feel happier at work. They will feel, this is good. I know what I'm doing today. I know how to do it. And I know who I need to turn to if I've got problems. And therefore that all equates to feeling valued at work, which is immeasurable. You cannot.
And inevitably you find that people are micromanaged because of this clash of communication styles. And when you were talking about color coding, my brain went, oh yeah, color coding saved me. So when I used to work for other people, because obviously I work for myself now, I still use it now, I would color code my entire calendar, not with red, amber and greens, because I didn't use that system, but I used specific colors for specific topics or tasks or projects, so that when my boss said, how much time have you spent on such and such this week, instead of me then panicking and going, hang on a minute, I need to go and count all the hours that are in my diary, I could literally have them looking over my shoulder and show them the week and go, all the dark blue ones are that subject, and they can see, oh, she spent that much time on it. Conversation over. No anxiety.
Everyone understands. Everyone knows what's going on. Great.
Everyone's a winner. And also, in most organisations, your boss can look at your diary anyway. You don't have to be there. It's open for people to view. Yeah. So if the boss wants to keep tabs on their team and they encourage their team to use the same colour coding for that project, they'll actually be able to compute how much time their team is spending on a specific project. So it could work fantastically for the whole team.
It does. And as I said right at the beginning, if you have all these systems written down, if you have protocols, if you have procedures, if you have guidelines, if you have checklists, the natural flow of business will be better, and it will work much better than if you didn't have all these things in. Because if you don't have all of those things in place, what you have, to me, is chaos or the potential for chaos. So if you've got things written down, you understand who's responsible for what their tasks are, what they have to do, who to report to, where to get hold of IT if your computer suddenly goes blank screen. You know, it might be just as simple as pick up the phone and dial 212 and you'll have IT. But if you don't know, because you haven't been given a directory of all the extensions, then you're going to be panicking. My computer's gone nuts. I don't know what to do. But simple things.
And rehearsing really what you want to say,
yes,
can be very useful sometimes. So say I'm going to see a boss a few levels up from where I am. So for some people, that could be a bit intimidating. You think, the big boss is coming, I've got to talk to them. And it might be that you're asking them if you can solve a problem in the office, because you're encouraged to do over and above your work, of course. So rather than just sort of try and blurt it all out, that boss, probably at that level, probably only wants headlines. Don't give me the nitty-gritty, give me your headlines. So I would rehearse in my head 3 main points. I'm here today because this is a problem in the office. The second one would be, I think this is the solution. And the third one would be, it's going to take this many man hours, this much resources, this is your return on investment. When can I start? And
absolutely.
Then it's back to the boss to say yes or no, or ask any questions or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I've had to walk the dusty corridors of the 4th and 5th floor before now, going to see a director about something. Yeah, they don't need to know the nitty gritty. They need to know, is this going to work on time, and can we get it out by next Friday? And
do you understand their pain or what they've got to report up? Because if you can let them know in your language that you understand what's important to them, it's a much easier yes. Yeah, the way that language works is something that, being a geologist, I got quite good at, because I might get called out to a site to go and quite literally see 3 men digging a hole. I was a geologist, so we look at the ground. So, you know, if it was above the ground, it wasn't of much interest to me. But if it's in the ground, great. So there might be 3 men digging a hole or standing around scratching the hedge, and this chap in a high-vis jacket and rigger boots turns up, and I look in the hole and I start asking questions. So I have to be able to communicate with the person digging the hole, which might be in flowery language with a few expletives dropped in there, because that's what's coming to me. We were digging this hole and X, Y, and Z happened, bleep, bleep, bleep. Yeah. I can't be offended by that. I have to be able to talk to them at that, in their language, in their understanding, communicate to understand what they found that is different from what they expected, and then come up with a way to resolve it. Deal with that at the site, no problem at all. Sorted. Then go back to my office, and then I have to convey the information to my boss, which might be one level of conversation, but then it might be, the director needs to know this. So off come the rigger boots, off comes the high-vis jacket, on comes your shirt and tie again. Right. Go and tell the director what's happened. So you have to go in and tell them what's happened. So you have to be able to communicate with the man digging the hole to your boardroom and your client. So the language you use, the tonality, what you use, there wouldn't, I don't mean to be disrespectful to the guys who are digging holes in grounds, but if I turned up with a flip chart with lots of things all over it, and it would probably not be what they want to see. They want to know, can you fix this for us, mate? Because we've been standing for 2 hours and it's costing us £300 an hour or £5,000 an hour. So important to them is to get things moving. So the being able to have conversations at the right level, conversing and making people understand and being understood yourself, is so important. And so important. And especially if you find yourself in a leader position yourself, which admittedly doesn't seem to happen that often with people who are neurodivergent. Getting promoted is hard, really hard for a lot of people. But if they are promoted, and often specialists will be forced to manage a team for some unknown reason, like a rite of passage, in order to get to the higher technical roles, which usually involve no teams whatsoever, go figure. And to be able to communicate to your team, this is the way I like to work. I prefer, I don't know, emails over whatever kind of communication. I need headlines only. I'll ask you if I need more detail. Could you not come to me every 5 minutes with something? Could you save them all up and we'll have a chat at 2 o'clock with all of your queries?
Absolutely.
It's that kind of managing people's expectations. This is how I like to work. I'd really like it if you could work with me on this. I also want you to tell me how you like to work, and I'll try and meet you halfway, you know.
Absolutely. You've just hit, I'm just conscious of time. I'm just completely aware of that. Is what you've just said. It's really important that you communicate with the best way for the people that you have in your teams. I've got 2 minutes left on the clock before it goes blank.
That always happens when I'm on.
That's quite all right. You're always welcome, Sam. You know that. I just wondered if anyone had anything else they wanted to add or ask in the brief minute and a half that we have left. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for coming on, and hopefully Zoe and SJ got something useful out of today. If you want to know more about how you can support people in the workplace, you know where to find me. I'll quite happily have a conversation with you away from the forum, and if an informal conversation, and if that needs to be taken further onto a commercial basis, I'm happy to do that. But quite happy to have a conversation with you off here about anything that you want to talk about with supporting people with Asperger's at work. The YouTube video of this will be uploaded tomorrow, and my YouTube channel has all of the videos for all of the sessions if anyone wants to catch up with you handy hints and tips and strategies from the preceding videos. So thank you all for coming on. It's been great to see you again, and I hope to see you next week. And I will be posting on Friday what next week's topic is, and I haven't decided what it is yet, so it'll be a surprise for me. So thank you all very much. Good to see you, and we'll see you again another time. Take care, Damien. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Sam.